The Grand Chamber was the largest room ever built by any living species. It floated in orbit around a dead star, a hollow sphere of glass and metal, where 342 alien races came to argue, trade, and pretend they were equals. They were not equals. Everyone knew it. The old species sat at the center, close to the speaker's platform, their chairs carved from rare stone, and their voices amplified above all others. The younger species sat near the walls, far from the light, where their words carried less weight, and their votes meant almost nothing. Humanity sat in the last row. Yoon Tae-ho stood at the speaking platform and looked out at the sea of alien faces. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no faces at all, just clusters of glowing sensors or floating clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields. He had stood here before, many times, and every time the feeling was the same. He was talking to a wall. He held up the grievance report. It was a thick document, over 900 pages long, compiled over 14 years by the best legal minds Earth had ever produced. It listed every broken promise, every ignored treaty, every time humanity had been sent to bleed on the front lines of someone else's war and received nothing in return. 14 years of work, reduced to a stack of data that no one in this room intended to read. For the third time in 60 years, Tae-ho said, his voice steady, humanity requests equal access to the shared technology treaties. For the third time, we ask for expansion rights into the open systems along the Veil Corridor, systems that no other species has claimed or colonized. And for the third time, we formally protest the use of human military forces as frontline shields in conflicts where we have no political stake and receive no compensation. He paused. The chamber was quiet, but it was not the quiet of attention. It was the quiet of boredom. Ambassador Gris, the Torvan representative, leaned back in his enormous chair and opened his mouth wide in what passed for a yawn among his species. He did not try to hide it. Several delegates nearby made sounds that might have been laughter. Elder Valmari, the Speaker of the Council, raised one of his 6 hands. Ambassador Yoon, he said, his voice deep and slow like grinding stone. The Council appreciates the thoroughness of your report. However, we are running behind schedule today. The matter of the Pelennor trade adjustments must be addressed before the session ends. Perhaps your concerns can be revisited at the next assembly. The next assembly was 8 months away. Tae-ho looked at Valmari for a long moment. He had shared meals with him, attended ceremonies with him, stood beside him during the Second Swarm War, when the sky above Veritas 6 was burning, and human soldiers were dying by the thousands to protect a Torvan mining operation. Volmari had thanked him then. A brief nod, nothing more, and then the elder had moved on to other business. Tae-ho felt a hand brush his arm. Park Soo-jin, his vice-ambassador, had stepped up beside him. She did not speak. She simply placed a datapad on the podium in front of him. On the screen was a single number, 97.3%. The vote had been held on Earth, on every colony, on every station and ship where humans lived. The question was simple: stay or leave. And 97.3% of every human being alive had chosen the same answer. Tae-ho picked up the datapad and looked at it for a moment. Then he looked back up at the chamber, at the bored faces, at the empty chairs where allies should have been, at Gris, who was now whispering something to the delegate beside him and smiling. "I have one final statement," Tae-ho said. Volmari waved a hand. "Be brief." Tae-ho straightened his back. The Earth Union, by a vote of 97.3%, has decided to withdraw from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All human embassies, outposts, trade stations, and military installations across Council space will begin shutdown procedures within the hour. The chamber went still. Not bored still, shocked still. You never wanted partners, Tejo said. You wanted pets. Something small and grateful that would fight your wars, and fix your machines, and sit quietly in the back row while you divided the galaxy among yourselves. He placed the grievance report gently on the podium. Consider this leash cut. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, Sujin fell into step. Then the rest of the human delegation rose. All 214 of them. Diplomats, attachés, translators, legal advisors, military liaisons. They stood together, pushed back their chairs, and followed their ambassador toward the doors. The chamber erupted, not in concern, in laughter. Gris slapped his clawed hand against his desk. "Let them go," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "The children are having a tantrum. They will come crawling back within a month." Volmari watched the humans leave. Something flickered behind his 6 eyes, something that might have been doubt, but he buried it quickly. He turned to the chamber and raised his hand for silence. "The human seat is dissolved," he announced. "No objections? Good. Now, regarding the Pelennor trade adjustments." No one objected. The session continued as if nothing had happened. Outside the grand chamber, in the long corridor that led to the docking bays, Sujin walked beside Tejo in silence. Their footsteps echoed against the polished floor. Behind them, the rest of the delegation followed without a word. "How long do you think before they notice?" Sujin asked quietly. Tejo did not look back. 6 months, he said. Maybe less. Sujin nodded. She had already run the projections. She knew exactly what was coming. She had known for 20 years. In the docking bay, the human fleet waited. 32 ships, engines warm, pointed toward open space. One by one, the delegation boarded. One by one, the ships powered up and turned away from the station. Across 900 worlds, human embassies began going dark. Lights switched off, doors sealed, flags came down, communication channels closed. The steady hum of human presence, the engineers, the doctors, the teachers, the soldiers, the traders, the fixers of broken things, all of it went quiet. The galaxy did not notice, not yet. But in the silence that followed, something began to crack. The first sign of trouble came from the food. On the agricultural world of Tenebar 4, the crops began to die. Not all at once, but slowly, field by field, in a pattern that no one could explain. The soil was the same. The water was the same. The sunlight was the same. But the crops, engineered decades ago to grow in alien soil and feed alien bodies, were failing. The roots curled inward. The leaves turned gray. Entire harvests collapsed into mush before they could be picked. The governor of Tenebar 4 sent a message to the council, requesting agricultural support. The council forwarded the request to the Bureau of Xenobiology. The Bureau sent back a short reply. The department responsible for cross-species crop adaptation had been shut down. Its entire staff had been human. No one had thought to learn what they did. No one had written it down. The humans had simply done the work, year after year, quietly. And everyone else had eaten the food and never asked how it got to their plates. Within 3 months, 14 colony worlds issued famine warnings. Within 5 months, food riots broke out on 6 of them. The food was only the beginning. On the trading station at Chorus Point, the life support systems started failing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, strange ways. The air recyclers ran a little too hot. The gravity generators drifted 0.5% off standard. The water filtration system began producing water that tasted like metal. Engineers from 3 different species examined the systems and found the same thing. Layers of modifications, patches, and improvements that had been added over decades. Clever fixes, elegant workarounds, small touches of genius buried deep in the code. All of it done by human engineers who had never been asked to document their work because no one cared enough to ask. Now those engineers were gone, and no one could read their code. Across the galaxy, the same story repeated itself. FTL relay beacons began losing sync, adding minutes, then hours, then days, to communication times between star systems. Medical translation databases, which allowed doctors of one species to treat patients of another, started producing errors. A Feldrathi physician on Station Oru accidentally gave a Yeni patient a dose of medication calibrated for a body 3 times its size. The patient nearly died. The doctor checked the database and found a note in the error log, written in human script. Yeni metabolic conversion factor updated. Please verify before administering. K. Minho, Engineering. No one knew who K. Minho was. No one had ever bothered to learn. Far from the Council's failing stations, Captain Han Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the Baekdu, a deep space carrier that now patrolled only the borders of human-controlled space. The ship was old, but solid, maintained with the kind of stubborn care that humans gave to things they loved. Jiwoo had commanded her for 11 years, and knew every sound she made, every vibration in her hull, every flicker of her lights. Today, the lights were steady, the hull was quiet, and the communication console was screaming. Distress calls, dozens of them. They came from alien worlds and stations across Council space, overlapping and desperate, filling the bridge with a chorus of fear in languages Jiwoo could barely understand. A colony begging for food, a station reporting atmospheric failure, a convoy under attack by swarm raiders with no military escort. Jiwoo stood with her hands clasped behind her back and listened. Kang Minho, her chief engineer, stood beside her. He was a short man with oil-stained hands and a face that always looked slightly annoyed, mostly because he usually was. He listened to the distress calls with his arms crossed and his jaw tight. "We could help," Jiwoo said quietly. "Some of them are close enough." "We could," Minho agreed, "but we won't." Orders. Common sense. Minho turned to face her. "Captain, do you remember Veritas 6? Do you remember what they did?" Jiwoo remembered. Everyone remembered. The colony on Veritas 6 had been home to 40,000 human settlers. When the swarm hit, the Council had a choice. Send the defense fleet to protect the colony, or redirect it to guard a Torvan mining operation worth 6 trillion credits. They chose the mine. 40,000 people died in 3 days. The Council sent a letter of condolence. Gris sent nothing at all. "I remember," Jiwoo said. "Then you know why we don't answer." She did know. She knew it in her bones. But she also knew what it felt like to hear someone crying for help and do nothing. It felt like swallowing glass. She turned off the distress channel. The bridge went quiet. Minho put a hand on her shoulder for a moment, then walked away to check on the engines, because that was what Minho did when he did not know what else to do. He fixed things. On the Council station, Trade Minister Pelax of the Yeni stood before Elder Volmari and begged. Pelax was small, even for a Yeni, with soft gray fur and wide dark eyes that made him look permanently worried. Today, the worry was real. "We must contact the humans," Pelax said. "We must ask them to return. The numbers do not lie, Elder. We are losing 12% of our agricultural output every month. The relay network will be fully degraded within a year. And the swarm is moving. They are testing the borders that humans used to guard, and they are finding them empty." Volmari sat in his great stone chair and stared down at the small Yeni diplomat with all 6 of his ancient eyes. "The Council does not beg," he said, "certainly not from a species that abandoned its seat in a fit of emotion. The humans will return when they realize they cannot survive without us." Pelax stared at him. "Elder," he said carefully, "have you looked at the sector maps recently?" Volmari had not. He did not say so, but Pelax could tell. "The human sectors are stable," Pelax said. "Their trade routes are active. Their colonies are growing, their military is patrolling their borders, and not a single swarm ship has crossed into their space. He paused. They are not the ones who cannot survive alone. Thalmari said nothing for a long time. Then, he waved his hand in dismissal. The council will adapt, he said. We always have. Pelax left the chamber with a heavy heart. He passed through the corridors of the station and stopped at a viewport that looked out into the dark. From here, he could see the galaxy map projected on a massive display screen mounted on the far wall of the observation deck. It showed every system, every trade route, every military zone in known space. The human-controlled sectors glowed in a calm, steady blue. Their borders were clean and bright. Their routes pulsed with healthy traffic. Everything else was turning red. Pelax pressed his small hand against the glass and watched the red grow. He thought about the human engineers who used to sit in the cafeteria on Deck 7, laughing too loud and eating strange food and fixing things that no one else could fix. He thought about how he had never once thanked them. He thought about how quiet the cafeteria was now. 1 year after the walkout, the galaxy learned something that changed everything it thought it knew about humanity. They had never been weak. They had just been quiet. In the heart of human-controlled space, now officially called the Terran Accord, Secretary General Yoon Taeho sat in his office aboard the administrative station orbiting Earth's moon. The office was simple: a desk, a chair, a window that looked out at the blue curve of Earth below. No stone carvings, no gold, no six-eyed statues of ancient leaders. Just a man and a window and a planet he had sworn to protect. Park Soo-jin walked in without knocking. She never knocked. Taeho had stopped expecting it years ago. She placed a datapad on his desk. On the screen was a file labeled Project Long Game. Taeho had seen it before, pieces of it, summaries, reports filtered through layers of security. But today, Soo-jin was showing him everything. It's time you saw the full picture, she said, since you're the one who'll have to decide what to do with it. Project Long Game had been started 82 years ago by a small group of human leaders who understood something that most people did not want to believe. The Galactic Council would never treat humanity as an equal. Not in 10 years, not in 100. The system was designed to keep younger species small, dependent, and useful. Humanity's role was to fight, to fix, and to be grateful for the privilege. So those leaders, quietly and carefully, began to build something else. The military came first. For decades, the Council believed that humanity had a modest defense fleet, enough to protect their colonies, but nothing more. They were wrong. Hidden in asteroid fields, buried inside hollowed-out moons, parked in the shadows of gas giants where no one ever looked, humanity had built a fleet 3 times the size of anyone's estimate. The ships were not copies of Council designs. They were something new. Faster, tougher. Built with technology that human engineers had developed in secret, while the Council assumed they were too primitive to innovate. Graviton lances that could tear a warship apart at the molecular level. Phase-shift armor that could make a cruiser flicker out of normal space for a fraction of a second. Just long enough for an enemy's weapons to pass through empty air. The Council had always told themselves that humans were technologically dependent, that without access to shared alien knowledge, they would still be burning fossil fuels on a single planet. It was a comfortable lie. The truth was that humans had been learning from every species they worked with, absorbing everything, improving on it, and keeping the results to themselves. Not out of greed, out of survival. Deep inside a rogue gas giant called EO7, hidden behind layers of radiation and magnetic interference that would fry any ship that did not know the exact entry path, was a research station called Apex. It had no official record. It appeared on no map. It did not exist, except that it did, and inside it, a woman named Shin Yeji had done the impossible. Stable wormhole generation, the ability to tear a hole in space, hold it open, and send anything through it. ships, supplies, people, to any point in the galaxy, instantly. The Council's greatest scientists had declared it theoretically impossible. They had published papers about why it could never work. Yeji had read those papers, found the errors, and spent 9 years proving them wrong. She was 34 years old and had not left the station in 3 years. She did not mind. She liked the quiet. While the Council controlled most galactic trade, humanity had been building relationships with species that existed outside the Council's reach. The Drift Clans, nomadic traders who moved between galaxies. The Muri Collective, a network of engineers and builders who had been expelled from the Council centuries ago for refusing to share their technology. The Borderless, a loose alliance of independent worlds that wanted nothing to do with Council politics. Together, they had created a trade network that rivaled the Council's own, and no one had noticed because no one had been watching. Taeho read the file slowly. When he was done, he set the datapad down and looked at Sujin. "You've been planning this for 20 years, he said. 82 years, she corrected. I've been planning my part for 20. The rest was built by people who knew they would never live to see it finished. She paused. That's the human way, isn't it? We plant trees we'll never sit under. Taeho nodded slowly. He thought about what this meant. He thought about the power sitting in those hidden shipyards, the potential humming inside Yeji's wormhole generators, the economic web that stretched across half the galaxy without the Council's knowledge or permission. He thought about what a lesser species might do with all of that. He thought about what humans should do with it. Far from Taeho's quiet office, at the edge of human-controlled space, a young pilot named Oh Do-yoon sat in the cockpit of his patrol fighter and watched something he had never expected to see. Alien ships, dozens of them, small, battered, overloaded vessels limping through open space toward the Terran border. They were not warships. They were transports, freighters, personal craft held together with tape and prayer. Refugee ships. They were fleeing the famine, the failing infrastructure, the swarm raids that the Council could no longer stop. They had nowhere else to go, so they came to the only place in the galaxy where the lights were still on. Do-yoon's orders were clear. No unauthorized vessels were to cross into Terran space. He was to warn them, redirect them, and if necessary, escort them back to Council territory. He opened a channel to the lead ship. On the screen appeared a Yeni family. A father, a mother, and 2 small children pressed against the viewport with wide, frightened eyes. The father spoke in broken human language. "Please," he said. "We have nowhere. Please." Do-yoon stared at the screen. He thought about his orders. He thought about the rules. Then he thought about those children, and the rules stopped mattering. He called his commander. Admiral Han Ji-woo answered immediately. "Admiral," Do-yoon said, "I have refugee ships at the border. Families, children. They're asking for entry." There was a pause. Do-yoon could hear Ji-woo breathing. He could hear the hum of her bridge in the background, the steady beep of systems working exactly as they should. "Open a corridor," Ji-woo said. "Humanitarian lane. Log it as a navigational anomaly." "Yes, Admiral." Minho's voice came over the secondary channel. "I'll handle the logs," he said. "Wouldn't be the first time I made a glitch look natural." Do-yoon opened the corridor. The refugee ships drifted through, slowly, carefully, as if they expected the door to close at any moment. It did not close. Do-yoon watched them pass, one by one, and he kept his hand on the controls until the last ship was safely inside human space. Back at the Council, 7 species had formally petitioned to leave and join the Terran Accord. Gris was screaming about it in every session, calling humanity a disease, a rogue element, a threat to galactic order. But his voice was getting smaller, because the chairs around him were getting emptier. The Council sent a communication request to Taeho. a formal invitation to discuss reconciliation and mutual cooperation. Tejo looked at the blinking light on his console. He thought about Volmari cutting him off mid-sentence. He thought about Gris yawning. He thought about the laughter that had followed him out of the grand chamber. The hollow swarm came out of the dark like a tide of teeth. 10 million bioships. That was the number the long-range scanners produced, and it was so large that the officers reading it assumed the equipment was broken. They ran the scan again, then again. The number did not change. 10 million living ships, each one a creature of bone and acid and hunger, pouring out of the deep black between galaxies where nothing was supposed to live. They hit the Outer Council territories first. The colony world of Faran II was gone in 6 hours. Not conquered, not occupied, gone. The swarm did not want territory. It wanted biomass. It ate everything alive on the surface and moved on, leaving behind a dead rock spinning in the dark. Then Kellis Station fell. Then the Torvon border outposts. Then the Pelennor trade worlds. System after system went dark on the galaxy map, winking out like candles in a wind that would not stop blowing. The Council mobilized its combined fleet, 200,000 warships from 30 species, the largest military force the Council had ever assembled. They met the swarm at the Vorin Gap, a narrow corridor between two nebulae that should have been easy to defend. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Council fleet was routed. It was not a question of firepower. The Council had plenty of guns. It was a question of coordination, of will, of the ability to hold a line when everything in front of you was screaming and dying and coming apart. For decades, that job had belonged to the humans. Human commanders had designed the battle plans. Human ships had held the center. Human soldiers had been the ones who refused to run when every survival instinct said to flee. The Council's military doctrine was built around that stubbornness, like a building is built around its foundation. Now, the foundation was gone, and the building was falling. Elder Volmari sat alone in his chamber, aboard the Council station. The lights were dim. The stone walls, which had once felt ancient and powerful, now felt like the inside of a tomb. On the screen in front of him, the galaxy map showed the swarm's advance. A wave of black pushing inward, eating the red, moving toward the center of Council space, where the station orbited its dead star. His hands were shaking. All 6 of them. He had lived for 400 years. He had seen wars before. He had seen crises before. But he had never seen the Council's fleet broken in open battle. And he had never felt this particular sensation in his chest. This cold weight that pressed against his heart and made it hard to breathe. He knew what it was. Not slightly wrong. Not wrong about a trade deal or a policy decision. Wrong about everything. Wrong about the humans. Wrong about the galaxy. Wrong about the order he had spent his entire life defending. He opened a communication channel. He typed 1 sentence. He stared at it for a long time. Then he sent it to the Terran Accord. The message read, "We were wrong. Please." On the Terran administrative station, Tejo received the message. He read it twice, then called an emergency session of the Terran Parliament. The debate was the most intense in human history. Representatives from every colony, every station, every ship with a vote, shouted and argued and slammed their fists on tables. Many of them wanted to let the galaxy burn. A representative from Veritas 6, a woman whose parents had died in the colony that the Council abandoned, stood at the podium and said, with a voice that shook with rage, "They left 40,000 of us to die so they could save a mine. Now they want us to save them? Let them choke." The chamber roared in agreement. Sujin stood next. She did not shout. She never shouted. She brought data. Cold, clear, undeniable data. "If the swarm consumes Council space," she said, "it will grow. It feeds on biomass. and Council space contains trillions of living beings. Once it has consumed them, it will have the energy and the numbers to turn toward us. We are not debating whether to save them. We are debating whether to fight the swarm now, when it is extended and vulnerable, or later, when it has eaten half the galaxy and is 10 times stronger. The chamber went quiet. Tejo spoke last. He stood at the podium and looked out at the faces of his people. Angry faces. Faces that had every reason in the galaxy to say no. "I know what they did to us," he said. "I stood in that chamber and listened to them laugh as we walked out. I remember, Veritas. I remember every war we fought for them, every life we lost for people who called us children." He paused. "But we did not leave the Council because we were weak. We left because we were strong enough to walk away. And now we have to be strong enough to walk back. Not for them, for us. Because the day we let billions die out of spite is the day we stop being the species I'm proud to lead." The vote was 54 to 46. It passed, barely. Admiral Han Ji-woo received the order at 0300 hours, ship time. She was already awake. She had been watching the swarm's advance on her tactical display for days, tracking its patterns, studying its movements, waiting for the call she knew would come. She opened a fleet-wide channel. "All commands, this is Admiral Han. General mobilization. Full deployment. We are going in." The Terran fleet began to move. From hidden shipyards and shadow docks across human space, warships emerged. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers, escort frigates, fast attack corvettes. Ships that the Council had never seen and could not have imagined. They formed up in disciplined lines, their engines glowing blue against the black. In the engineering bay of the Baekdu, Minho stood before his masterwork. He called it the Sunbreaker. It was a weapon built around a miniature wormhole generator, designed to be deployed in the heart of an enemy fleet. When activated, it would open a wormhole, collapse it immediately, and create a temporary gravitational singularity, a point of gravity so intense that everything within 1,000 kilometers would be crushed into nothing. It was the most destructive weapon any human had ever built, and Minho hated it. He hated that he was good enough to make it work. He ran his hand along its casing. "One shot," he muttered. "Let's make it count." On the Torvan homeworld, Ambassador Gris stood in his command bunker and watched the sky. The swarm was 3 days away. His fleet was shattered. His allies had fled. He had spent his entire career mocking the humans, dismissing them, using them, and now he was about to die because they were not here. Then the sky split open. Wormholes, dozens of them, tearing through the atmosphere like holes punched in a sheet of paper. And through those holes came ships, human ships, hundreds of them, dropping out of impossible space in perfect formation, their shields blazing white against the dark sky, their weapons already powering up. Gris stared. His clawed hands dropped to his sides. Jiwoo's voice came through every speaker on the planet, broadcast on every frequency, in every language the translation systems could produce. "All ships, this is Admiral Han. We didn't come back because they asked. We came back because no one else can do what we do. All wings, engage." The first human guns fired, and the sky turned to light. The Battle of the Palix Line was the largest military engagement in the history of known space, and it began with a silence. Admiral Han Ji-woo stood on the bridge of the Baekdu and looked at the tactical display. The swarm filled the screen. A wall of bioships stretching across an entire star system, so dense that the scanners could not separate individual contacts. Behind that wall, 300 billion living beings on 100 worlds waited to be devoured. Between the swarm and those worlds stood the Terran fleet, and around the Terran fleet, what remained of the Council's forces had gathered, battered, frightened, but present. For the first time in galactic history, every species that could still fight was fighting under a single command, a human command. Ji-woo opened the fleet-wide channel. Her voice was calm. It was always calm. That was what made people follow her. Not fire, not fury. Calm. The kind of calm that said, I have been here before, and I am still standing. All ships, this is Admiral Han. The plan is simple. We hold the center. The Allied fleets take the flanks. We do not retreat. We do not break formation. The swarm feeds on panic. We give it nothing. Today we fight together, not as humans and aliens, not as council and accord, as people who refuse to let the dark win. Han out. The swarm attacked. It came like a living storm, bioships crashing against the defensive line in waves. The Terran ships absorbed the first impact and held. Their graviton lances cut burning lines through the swarm, and their phase-shift armor flickered like ghosts, letting the enemy's acid missiles pass through empty space. The center held. The center always held. On the flanks, it was a different story. The Torvan warships fought hard, but they were damaged and demoralized. A massive swarm tendril broke through their formation, and the Torvan captains began to pull back. On the other flank, the Feldrothi cruisers held longer, but when they saw the Torvans retreating, doubt crept in. Their formation began to loosen. Gaps appeared. The swarm poured through like water through cracks in a dam. Ji-woo watched the flanks crumbling on her display. She had expected this. She had planned for it. But plans were paper, and the battle was blood. She opened a channel to all Allied ships. Not just the Terran fleet, everyone. Every scared captain on every damaged ship that was thinking about running. "Hold your ground," she said. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade through fog. "I know you're afraid. I know you've lost ships. I know you've never fought like this before. But look at the center. Look at my ships. We are not moving. We are not running. And we are asking you to stand with us. Not behind us, with us. We hold together or we die alone." For a moment, nothing happened. The flanks continued to buckle. The swarm continued to pour through. Ji-woo held her breath. Then, one by one, the Allied ships stopped retreating. A Torvan destroyer turned back toward the fight, then a Feldrothi cruiser, then a Yeni escort ship, no bigger than a shuttle, its weapons barely strong enough to scratch a swarm hull. It turned around anyway. It flew straight into the gap and started firing. The flanks reformed. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but they held. Deep in the swarm's formation, the command cluster pulsed like a diseased heart. It was the brain of the swarm, the network of massive bioships that coordinated the rest. Kill the brain, and the body would die. That was the theory. The problem was getting close enough to try. Oh Do-yoon flew escort for the Sunbreaker. His squadron had started with 12 fighters. He was down to 4. The swarm threw everything it had at them. Acid missiles, ramming drones, living mines that exploded in clouds of corrosive gas. Do-yoon dodged and weaved and fired until his guns overheated. Then he switched to backup weapons and kept firing. His wingmate, a pilot named Baek Nari, took a direct hit. Her ship spun out, trailing smoke and fire. Do-yoon heard her voice on the radio, calm and clear. "I'm done. Go. Finish it." Then her channel went dead. Do-yoon gritted his teeth and flew harder. The Sunbreaker was strapped to the belly of a carrier behind him, its casing glowing faintly as Minho's wormhole generator charged inside it. Minho was aboard the carrier, his hands flying over controls, his face tight with concentration. 30 seconds, Minho said over the channel. "Get me 30 seconds of clear space." Do-yoon had 3 fighters left. He spread them in a screen around the carrier and threw everything he had at the swarm ships closing in. Missiles, cannons, even his own ship's kinetic ram when a bioship got too close. He felt the impact shudder through his bones. Warning lights screamed. He ignored them. "Now," Minho said. The carrier released the Sunbreaker. It drifted forward into the heart of the command cluster. A small dark shape, against the enormous pulsing mass of the swarm's brain. For 1 second, it hung there, silent and small and almost beautiful. Then it detonated. The wormhole opened and collapsed in the same instant. A point of infinite gravity bloomed in the center of the swarm's command cluster, and everything within 1,000 kilometers was pulled inward. Bioships the size of cities folded like paper. The command cluster compressed, twisted, and vanished into a singularity that burned white-hot for 3 seconds before winking out of existence. The swarm screamed, with something deeper, something that every living being in the system felt in their chest like a punch. A psychic howl of shock and agony and confusion. The millions of remaining bioships stopped moving. They shuddered. They drifted. Without the command cluster to guide them, they were just animals, hungry, lost, and afraid. And then they ran. The swarm broke. For the first time in its existence, it fled. The bioships turned and scattered into deep space, leaving behind a battlefield littered with debris and death and the impossible reality of survival. The galaxy had won. In the days that followed, the cost was counted. The Terran fleet had lost a quarter of its ships, 14,000 human lives. The Allied fleets had lost even more. Entire species had been reduced to a handful of survivors, clinging to damaged stations. The swarm had left scars that would take generations to heal, but they were alive. Because of the species that had been laughed out of the Grand Chamber 18 months ago. The Galactic Council was dissolved. No one argued about it. No one pretended it was still working. The old order was dead, and everyone knew it. In its place, Tejo proposed a new body. He called it the Galactic Accord. Sujin had written the charter, every word of it, carefully, precisely, over months of quiet work. Equal votes, equal rights, equal responsibilities. No species ranked above another. No one sent to fight and die without a voice in the decision. No more back rows. The signing ceremony was held in the Grand Chamber, the same room where Tejo had walked out. The same podium, the same glass walls looking out at the same dead star. But the room felt different now. The stone chairs of the old powers had been removed. In their place were simple seats, arranged in a circle, all at the same level. Then Pelax, who wept quietly as he wrote his name. Then representatives from species that had never had a voice before. One by one they came forward, until the charter carried the names of every species that had survived the war. Gris signed last. He walked to the podium slowly, his claws clicking on the floor. He did not look at Tejo. He did not speak. He signed the charter and walked back to his seat, and if anyone saw his hands trembling, no one mentioned it. After the ceremony, Volmari found Tejo alone in a corridor. The old elder was diminished now. His 6 eyes were cloudy. His title was gone. His authority was gone. He was just an old man standing in a hallway, trying to understand something that his 400 years of life had not prepared him for. "I have a question," Volmari said, "one I have been unable to answer." Tejo waited. "We mocked you. We used you. We let your people die to protect our profits. And when we called for help, you came. You bled for us. You lost thousands of your own to save billions of ours." Volmari's voice cracked. "What kind of species does that?" Tejo looked at the old elder. He thought about all the things he could say, about duty, about strategy, about the long-term survival calculations that Sujin had laid out for Parliament. All of those things were true, but they were not the real answer. "We're human," Tejo said. "It's what we do." Volmari stared at him for a long time. Then he lowered his head. All 6 eyes closed, in the deepest gesture of respect his species could offer. He turned and walked away without another word. On the observation deck of the Baekdu, 5 people stood at the viewport and watched the ceremony through the glass walls of the Grand Chamber below. Jiwoo, Minho, Doyun, Yeji, and Sujin. They stood in a line, shoulder to shoulder, looking down at the room where the galaxy was being remade. Minho crossed his arms. "Think they've learned their lesson?" he asked. Jiwoo smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind that comes after a long, hard fight that you were not sure you would survive. She looked at the circle of seats below, at the species that had mocked them and feared them and needed them, now sitting as equals for the first time. "Doesn't matter," she said. "We'll be here either way." The Baekdu hummed around them, steady and warm, its engines turning, its lights burning bright. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched out in every direction, endless and cold and full of things that wanted to eat the living. But the lights were on, all of them, across every system, every station, every world, where a human hand had built something, or fixed something, or held the line when no one else would. The lights were on, and they were not going out.